So I was in a wheelchair in a nightclub, and these people were surrounding me and flocking me with all sorts of attention. Girls were coming up to me asking for my Snapchat, my Instagram. I had guys offering me drinks. I had people coming up and trying to dance next to me while I was wheeling it on the dance floor. And I was fascinated by this. I did not want to go there at the beginning of the night. I was sore that morning. I didn't want to go there, but my cousin encouraged me. And that experience honestly just blew my mind. And I'm going to share what I gained with it and what blew my mind about it in greater context at the end of this video, so that I can give you a greater understanding of what vulnerability is. Because that's what this video is about. And maybe you've heard this term before, maybe you kind of understand it, maybe you've read a bit of Brene Brown's research, but what I'm going to try and do is combine two completely different personalities within talking about vulnerability. So on one hand, I'm going to have David Goggins, who is a Navy SEAL, a triathlete, who's a motivational speaker, author, and is voted one of the toughest men alive on the planet. You can look at some of the crazy stories he has done and some of the crazy obstacles he has overcome. He is honestly insane in what he's done. And then you have Brene Brown, who's a human behavioral researcher, worked with leaders all across the world and helps them embrace courage, and is one of the most viewed TED Talks ever on the power of vulnerability. So during this video, I'm going to share the major 3 things I've taken away from them that you can hopefully apply to your life. The first point is embrace, don't escape. So within what we're going through, I've often felt it. You want to escape the feeling, you want to escape the thoughts you just had, you want to escape the work that you have to do. But you're eventually going to have to embrace something. And you're eventually going to have to embrace the way you feel, eventually you're going to have to embrace the way you think. And acknowledging it, accepting it, often actually makes it easier, and it's often the most scared thing we need to do. There's uncertainty within that acceptance, but once that acceptance is there, then you feel a level of comfort and belonging. As Brene Brown says, you can't selectively numb emotions. If I numb the good, then I also numb the bad. And I meant the other way around. If I numb the bad, then I also numb the good, and then I feel nothing, which ends up just being this feeling of apathy, which isn't worth it, which is this feeling of like hopelessness, nothing's going to get better. Is because you're almost scared to feel good again, because then you know it's not going to last, and then you feel like, because it's not going to last, it's not worth it, so I'm going to feel bad. And for a while this is like a coping mechanism, and this is my understanding of it, but eventually we're all going to have to embrace what we're feeling, and through that embracing, then you can start to feel things again and feel things in a more childlike manner. Like children don't go, I'm feeling grumpy, it's not good to feel grumpy, I feel grumpy. They just feel grumpy, and then 2 minutes later you see their emotions change, and then they'll be like in awe at a leaf or whatever it is. And I think that comes from being able to embrace what you're going through, because then you're more present, you're more attentive afterwards. But that period in between embracing can be really tricky. And the Navy SEALs call this embracing the suck. And David Goggins talks about some things are just going to things are just going to be hard sometimes. And when things are hard, having this mantra of I'm just going to embrace the suck, as opposed to run away from it, escape from it, pretend that it doesn't exist, is far more productive. And things suck less when you embrace them, as opposed to trying to not acknowledge that they're actually there. And I just find that those ways of framing it and continually trying to get myself to embrace things and not escape things really helps.
And I think the real gift that's built into this whole thing is how you reframe vulnerability. Like, we tend to think of vulnerability as a weakness, or somebody who's soft, right. And you embody it in a completely different structure to show people that it is strength. Like, if you want to be hard and you want to be strong, vulnerability and open-mindedness are the keys to that kingdom.
And you said it perfectly there. The one thing that made me who I am today is being vulnerable. It's breaking myself down to the absolute rock bottom and being able to tell people who I am. And that's how I fixed it. Literally, being able to look somebody in the eye and say, you know what, man, I have a whole bunch of character problems, character flaws. I've lied about this. I've cheated here. I'm insecure here. This isn't the real me. I lied to you about that. I wanted your acceptance in life. All those things happen.
2. Jars. So what do jars have to do with vulnerability? And if I'm being vulnerable, that wasn't a very good explanation of a jar with my hand gestures there. But both Brené Brown and David Goggins had this symbol of jars that they used in their life. And for Brene Brown, it was the marble jar. And the marble jar represents those people who you can trust and building trust. And how she framed it is, when I am building trust or seeing if I can trust someone, everyone assuming familiarity and assuming positive intent is really good at the start. As one of the common things she says is vulnerability and trust are interchangeable. So sometimes I have to be vulnerable first for someone to feel like they can trust me, and sometimes I only want to be vulnerable with people who I trust. So finding that balance between the two. So one of the examples that she explains is a marble jar. And a marble jar, if you look at it, it has each little piece in it, and it builds up and fills up to a full marble jar. So when you meet someone, they are a full marble jar. And each marble represents trust. So when a marble jar is full, you fully trust that person. But each time they do an untrustworthy behavior, they belittle you, they talk bad about you, they do something that disrespects you and doesn't align with your values, then they lose trust. And then each time they do a little action, a little meaningful thing, they build trust. And it's far easier to lose trust. So every time they do something, it's like a whole handful of marbles are getting thrown out. And each time you build something, it's like a little piece of marble is getting put back in the jar. And when we're sharing all of who we are, I don't want to share everything I am to every single person. That would be completely overwhelming. But I want to share completely myself in my entirety to certain people in my life, because that's when we feel the greatest sense of belonging, where we can share, as I've highlighted in the social media video, our highs and our lows at the same time. And that's when we feel the true sense of connection, I feel. So that was her analogy with the marble jars, which I thought was very useful to think about, as it's not some grand gesture, like if I give you some huge romantic getaway, that doesn't really mean that you trust me. It's each little thing day by day that builds that trust and gives you that feeling of trust with that person. And then the second one was Goggins with his cookie jar, and how each time when he's going through a really tough experience, or he's had a really tough experience and he feels like he needs a motivation or he needs to change his mindset around it, he thinks about a time that he's had a really tough time before and what got him through it. And then he remembers that memory, and then that's like a piece of the cookie jar. So then he takes, like, I guess symbolically it would be like a bite of the cookie, which would be the past thing that he overcame that he didn't think he was going to overcome, and then that gives him confidence for the future, or reaffirms his future and where he's heading. So those are the jars. Now on to point number 3. So within this, one of the things is also selectively caring whose opinions you care about within what you're sharing. Because sometimes it can be overwhelming with which direction you want to go, what is actually true to you and what is just outside noise. And one of the most useful things that Brene Brown says, or she shared, is having a piece of paper. This sounds so simple, but writing down, and really like writing it down makes a difference. People who you care about and people who you know care about you. And it could be even people you admire as well, and people who you trust, who you admire, who you value their opinion. It's like your sounding board. And then you write that down, you put it up, and you put it in your wallet, and then you reflect on it when you're going through a tough time where you have to make a tough decision and you don't know whose opinions to care about. Because I know I've heard the quote before, like, don't care about people's opinions, like validate your own opinion, and this is what a lot of this channel is about, is uncovering truth. But sometimes I still fall into the trap of it, and I feel like everyone does. It's hard to say I don't care about anyone's opinion, as we all care about some people's opinions, and we don't want to care overly. We want to filter their opinions, which is the right term, and I like that. So that paper one, having those people that you care about, people you admire. It could be a really short list, and even if maybe by some chance you don't even have one person on the list, what you can do is you can become that one person who is the full marble jar for other people, and then you'll model it and then they'll reflect it back to you. So the best way to find people who you want to be around is to become the person you want to be around. So I hope you enjoyed this. I felt slightly vulnerable sharing. Oh, I nearly forgot the end of the wheelchair. Okay, that would have been, if you had stayed the whole way to hear that, that would have been slightly anticlimactic. So what has the wheelchair story got to do with vulnerability? To me, it deepened my understanding of vulnerability and what it means to be vulnerable. As my hypothesis as to why people gave me so much attention, there was such a positive feedback from me in the club was, first of all, it's bizarre and people are drunk, so I acknowledge that. But second of all, I had a very clear weakness and they could see that. And then I was choosing, despite that, to have fun. So then it let them have fun because they saw me as worse off and I was still having fun. And that was my interpretation of it. And I thought it was fascinating. It also gave me one other aspect is we can't always appreciate or see when someone's in pain. They could clearly see I wasn't, I guess, in my fittest shape. But in that moment, they gave me so much empathy, so much more compassion because they could see it. But sometimes psychological pain or emotional pain is just as hard or even harder than physical pain, but we can't see it and we can't process it. So that's what it's like having a conversation with a marble jar friend, is they can see it, they can witness it if they're close to you and you can express it. And then when you express it, you shine a light on it and then it doesn't seem as dark anymore. So I know that was pretty deep, and if you just watched this and you found something useful from this, that's awesome. If you are going through a tough time and you don't feel like you have a marble jar friend or someone close to you that can support you, there's so many online counseling services you can have a look at. I'm going to suggest Virtual Psychologist, and you can have a look at their blog post if you're going through a tough time, or even if you just want a greater understanding to maybe help someone else who's going through a tough time. And you can always seek out a professional's help. This is my perspective, so I'm not an expert in dealing with this. These are just things that I found really, really useful. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. I wish you well on your journey, and well on your journey to embracing vulnerability. And until next time, uncover your truth.